So I'm just going to introduce myself, and then I'm going to allow the panelists to introduce themselves. And then from there, I'm just going to kind of touch a little bit on the topic and then go into the questions. This is a comfortable space. This is a safe space for us to share our graduate school experiences. And yeah, so with that, I'm going to just start off. So my name is Yodit Hagos. I'm an academic coaching coordinator here at the Center for Academic Enrichment and Outreach. And I'm going to pass it on to Darlene.
Hi everyone, my name is Roland Magana. I'm a first-year graduate student in the Couple and Family Therapy program. I'm also a support specialist for the CAEO program as well. And yeah, I'm just super excited to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
Impressive. Hi everyone, thanks for coming. My name is Elia del Carmen. I'm a senior in the Urban Studies program in the Greenspan College of Urban Affairs, which I'm repping today. Also in the college, I minored in criminal justice, and I'm a student in the Brookings Public Policy minor program, where I also am a student researcher at Brookings Mountain West and the Lindsay Institute.
Hey everyone, I'm Carmen Nieto. I am a second year in the Couple and Family Therapy Master's program now. I did my undergrad here at UNLV, and I'm a support specialist for CAEO now.
Hello everyone. My name is Eduardo Diaz Santiago. I am also a Couple and Family Therapist student. I'm a third year. I also did my undergrad here. I was a psych major and I minored in Spanish. And I'm also a support specialist, a GA. Yeah.
Welcome, esteemed panelists. As you guys can see, there's some continuity there, right? The reason why we're here today is essentially to talk about our graduate school experiences from the panelists' perspective. And I just want to talk a little bit about cultural wealth and why that matters. So we believe that, lived experiences matters, and your cultural knowledge can enhance the quality of any work or educational experience. You bring your full and authentic self, your talents, your strengths, your experience to campus as students. And so as you bring your full authentic self with your talents, you also you are also engaged in opportunities such as volunteer roles, experiential learning, and internships and clinicals for some of you guys, and practicums as a part-time and soon to be full-time counselors. So with that, you're equipped with a rich cultural wealth that you bring to those particular experiences. And so we're going to discuss how that impacts your graduate school education and also your pursuit of careers after graduate school. So, and there's some key aspects to cultural wealth. There is familial, there's social, aspirational, navigational, linguistic, and resistance capital. So within those subsects, we're going to kind of touch a little bit about those particular subsects. So to begin, I just want to provide you guys the opportunity to answer how you got into your particular major and essentially, or your field of study, and essentially how did the family impact that pursuit?
So I got into my major, or my current field of study. It was the last semester of my senior year, so it's not like I planned, so like, oh, I'm gonna be a therapist. No, like I graduated high school and I was like, what do I want to do? I was like, oh, psychology 101 in high school was fun. So I started doing that and I got really into it. And I was like, I always knew I wanted to help people to some degree, in some regard. And so I was like, oh, like I could be a therapist. So I took a CFT course here at UNLV, and I was like, this is amazing, I want to do this. And in terms to how my family kind of directed me in this direction, the CFT field, the marriage and family therapy field, is very systems-minded, so it's a lot of relationships between people. And coming from my background, I'm Mexican-American, I'm very community-oriented, right? And the community is everything for us. So it was very easy to go from the individually minded psychology field to the CFT field, which was very systems-based. So that's sort of how my family contributed to me pursuing a CFT degree.
I wish my path was kind of that set out, but in high school I started wanting to become a dentist. I went to a dental assisting program at a magnet school, very like, okay, bio is going to be my route, that's it. I started UNLV, started in bio, did a year and a half, got into physics, and I was like, it's not for me. And so I went into the counselor's office, the advisor's office, and I was like, hey, I don't think this is what I need to be doing anymore. And yeah, we had a conversation like, what's going on? Do you need to withdraw? Do you need to audit? All those college terms. And I was like, no, I think I'm switching my major. And I switched to psychology. I was already doing a minor in family studies. And that's kind of what sparked my interest in couple and family therapy. So then I finished my major, psych major, and then I did a minor, the minor in family studies and the minor in neuroscience. So that's kind of the path that I'm taking now. Like Eduardo said, there's a big systems aspect to CFT. And I think I noticed it also coming from a Mexican-American background. There's so many things that you see in having a big family, like speaking for myself, 60 plus family members, and I was like, okay, something's happening. And so that's kind of where I was like, okay, couple and family therapy is where I need to be to help those people in the community that had similar experiences, that have shared experiences, those people that just need that extra help that sometimes we see a lack of those resources in.
I too am Mexican American. Criminology is my field of study. Criminal justice is my minor, and urban studies is my major, but I intend to focus on criminology and criminal justice in grad school. And that is because my family was victimized by police brutality when I was very young. It was a big ordeal. I litigated. I ended up working for several law firms during that time, so I was exposed to criminal defense to some degree. But more than anything, I was actually exposed to victims of crime more than defendants at the firms that I worked at. So, for example, I got to help a woman and walk her through the domestic violence route, the human trafficking route. I was working with detectives, working with the courts, working with victims. I learned what it was like to be trauma-informed very early on. And so that informed everything that I did in school. Urban studies is everything, but my favorite aspect of urban studies, besides elements like sustainability, governance, intergovernance relations, crime. Crime is as old as time, and so that is how my family's story influenced me. But since then, they have supported me in every way possible to recover from that, and they've done great too.
So during my junior year of high school, I did AP psychology, and I was like, this is great, I love it. Entered college, I'm like, yep, major is gonna be psychology, I already know it. And then I realized like there's so many other like careers within this specific like field itself, and I was like, oh, I'm not sure, like, will I pick the right one? So I really tried everything. I did, social work, I did, psychology, psychiatry, even like I went into kind of managing like pharmaceutical, like, behind the scenes, and it was really informative to know. But then I did an internship with a licensed marriage family therapist about her private practice and kind of how she was able to kind of build her own background within, what she had, and how she was able to kind of reach out to her audience that way, and that was really informative. My CFT courses too, during my undergrad, I had a Professor Tamara. The first person who I spoke with, I was like, I want to know more about your field. How is it flexible? How can I kind of work and navigate this field? So she was really helpful to kind of start and kind of help me with that. And then with my family specifically, they mentioned like obviously like the stigma of mental health. So I still get, questions about like, oh, like a therapist, like that's kind of different, and my parents, my intimate family has been really supportive in that way of like kind of supporting me in what I want to do. Sharing, the actual resources that are necessary for our community as well. And then also, I really hope to, use my Spanish in order to kind of reach a bigger audience, maybe are a bit more intimidated to come to therapy because of the language barrier. So I really hope that I can make it that way as well.
Such well thought out answers. So moving on, we're going to talk a little bit about like the social capital that's necessary to prepare students for graduate school. And so I know that we have one undergrad on the panel, but the reason why this undergrad happens to be on the panel is because you just happen to be very industrious, and our prior experiences have shown me that. And so you're a shining example of that. And so I'm going to start with you. Okay. So in terms of preparing for graduate school, because I know that that's where you're headed, what are, like, who are the folks in your community that can speak authentically about your qualities, your skills, and also, are you part of any organizations, student organizations, and what opportunities on campus have you found, or events that have propelled you to that particular point, or this point now?
I love that question, Yodi.
I
And
know.
thank you for telling me why I was on the panel, because I wasn't sure.
Really?
So now that I know. Okay, I am graduating this semester, and application deadlines for my intended graduate program open in January, and they close in April. So I have some time to request my letters of recommendation from those people who know me very well.
I love how you looked at me directly.
That does include the Center for Academic Enrichment and Outreach. I have been in the Anna Peasy program since I was a freshman, not because I have 56% Native American ancestry, but because I'm a first-generation college student. And so they held a special spot just for me, and they've been really supportive ever since. Some of my first research experiences, my first experience on a panel, working with students, working with older students was the moment that I realized, oh, I need to be in some kind of graduate preparatory program. So I did Grad Rebel Advantage, where they paired me with a mentor in my field. And Sean, who now has his doctorate and teaches on the East Coast, really held my hand through the whole thing. He introduced me to professors in the field. He took me to my first national research conference, which we did as a part of another program hosted by the Graduate College called the Research and Mentorship Program, which both of those I highly recommend for any undergraduate in any field. So the Anna Peasy folks, and some of whom are not here anymore, and graduate students, my professors, of course, not all of them, but some of them, especially in my field, and more than anything, actually, Brookings. Brookings Mountain West is a nonprofit organization. Brookings is the oldest and largest think tank in the world. We've been around since the FDR administration, when we helped them put out the New Deal. So they're a pretty influential part of my life in that I've learned to research from the ground up, but also been exposed to some of the brightest minds in the world. And so that led me to an internship in the Foreign Policy Division of the Brookings Institute in DC. Dr. Vonda Felbaugh-Brown is a mentor of mine, and somebody who knows me well, because she gave me the truth. She said, this is not going to be easy, so I'm gonna be really tough on you. And sure enough, I learned out in the real world. So those programs together, I have since culminated at presentations for the Office of Undergraduate Research here on campus, for example. I am in several honor societies: National Collegiate, Criminal Justice Honor Society, Urban Studies Honor Society, and that is, so far as an undergraduate, hasn't done much for me, but I think that it will in graduate school. Did I answer all the parts of all that question?
You did.
Okay, great.
You did such a great job.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you so much. And so essentially, since you are the undergrad on the panel, I wanted the audience to kind of hear your perspective, but I'm going to pose that same question to the graduates.
So obviously being, a first-year student, I can kind of speak more towards my undergraduate experience. So I was part of the McNair Scholar Program here. I think that was really helpful to kind of being able to have a mentor and also a timeline exactly of when and who and how I'm supposed to get to graduate school. Also the Honors College as well, they are really helpful to kind of give me more of a background behind like what else I can do within, my community and my field, and also getting a lot of inspiration from my peers, and they were just incredible to kind of talk about different goals and different majors. I was also part of the Grad Rebel Advantage program, first as a mentee, then as a co-mentor, and then this year as a mentor itself. So it was really exciting just to kind of start from like the very beginning, and then to kind of also have my own group of students who I can kind of guide and also provide these resources for them as well. I was also, involved in, extracurriculars that kind of was able to cultivate more of my culture as well. So just like here and there, these events where it was maybe specifically like, for example, it was like for like this example right now, like a panelist, where I would always come up and I would see like people like sitting here and I'm like, wow, one day I wish to be not even like their position, but I wish I can learn from their experiences and be able to know like what they said was true. So that was really helpful. And then also as a mentor for the honors college first year students, just like seeing, you know, fresh faces coming into the honors college and UNLV was really exciting. All the excitement they had, so much energy, and being able to kind of provide a more structural, I guess, resource for them to kind of be able to accomplish those goals and to, you know, go forth and, you know, to reflect on what they've done. So yeah.
So if I were to start naming names, you guys probably would not follow along with who these people are who can speak to my authentic self. I think the most important thing to say here, though, is that you'd be surprised who's in your corner. Sometimes it's not someone that you would expect. It's not your usual connections that you make. And a lot of the times, for me, it wasn't necessarily in my program because I kind of came to it. I feel like I came to it late. But it's never too late, and people will always tell you that, and I'm just going to repeat it. It's really important that you like cultivate these relationships, and you'll notice which ones you are cultivating. One of the people who wrote me a letter of recommendation for my program was actually my freshman English professor,
Wow.
which I hadn't talked to in like 3 years. So it was really like important that, you know, you made an impact there. So that's where you kind of notice like, oh, these are the people who can speak to who you really are. Sometimes
Carmen.
the people that you don't.
How was that process in asking him for the letter of recommendation? I know this is off script.
No,
but
you're good.
Yeah.
In asking them for the letter of recommendation, so I sent an email, and I was just like, I said, hello, I introduced myself. I was like, I don't know if you remember me. I was in your class for 2 semesters. It was a really long time ago, freshman year. I'm planning on working towards applying to this program. Would you be able to meet with me for a Zoom chat, just to kind of like, you know, refresh and say hello again? And they were like, yeah, and I would love to write your letter of recommendation, you know, kind of have to put that in the email too. Why is it that you're writing to them? And so then we have this conversation over Zoom, and they were like, I see you in this profession. I didn't see you in bio, but now I see you in your actual couple and family therapist program. Like, that's where I see you. I can see you doing great things. That meant the world to me. And that's when you kind of see, like, your supporters sometimes aren't very obvious, but they're there. So yeah, that's how that process was.
I am not as impressive as Darlin is. You know, she was doing a whole lot. I was part of the TRIO program in high school, so that's sort of they led me to applying to college. They really helped a lot. But then I just lost track. I was like, okay, well, I didn't remember them at all. So, and then in college, I was working and I was doing classes, so I was not doing extracurriculars. I didn't do any extracurriculars until I became a grad student, actually. So. Who was supporting me? It was mostly professors, honestly. It was professors and previous employers who I had worked with. So don't think just because, you know, you're not out here doing 5 years of community service or something like that, that you're not able to enter the field that you're looking for. You could definitely still do it. It's just, you know, maybe you're not going to look as good on paper, but that you have other great qualities about you to still, you know, go into the profession you're looking to go into. So yeah, I was not a part of anything until grad school, but now, you know, I was the vice president of the Honor Society for Marriage and Family Therapists. I became, I got a fellowship with SAMHSA, which is like the government, you know, mental health people, and they work with substance and stuff like that. And so I got that.
That's a big honor. That's a national organization.
It is, yeah.
Yes. You're being modest.
I don't want to brag. You know, like,
And the way I found out was I was actually trying to find a picture of Eduardo for another event, and I found his picture on the internet, and he had this huge fellowship that was a federally funded fellowship, right, or organization. Yeah, so it's a big accomplishment to you. Yeah, kudos to you.
again, I didn't do that until grad school.
Yeah.
But yeah, just like Carmen was saying, you never know who's going to be in your corner, and so just establishing those relationships with professors, you know, staying after and talking to them like, oh, I don't understand this or I don't understand that, and then, you know, I joke a lot. I mean, you know, that's who I am, and so just like joking with them and establishing those relationships with them outside of, you know, class hours was very beneficial to me. And actually, one of the recommendations that got me the fellowship was from a previous fellow in my program. And I didn't know that I was going to be able to read the letter of recommendation he wrote me, but oh man, that thing made me tear up. I was like, damn, like, well, my apologies for cussing, but yeah, I was like, wow, like that's amazing that you would say those type of things about me. And I didn't even know that, you know, by participating in class and being an active student, I was doing the things that you were saying that I was doing. So yeah, that's kind of what I have done.
That's awesome. That's really great. So one of the things that I kind of struggle with quite often is like finding the hope. You guys, I feel like often I'm like always looking for the hopefulness in a situation. And so I know that in grad school that you definitely have to see the light at the end of the tunnel. So in terms of aspirational capital, how do you maintain hope and then continue with your dreams for your future in the face of like perceived and real barriers? Are there any things any convictions or motivations that that you keep? And then also in terms of in keeping those dreams and aspirations and motivations, where do you see yourself after 5 years?
I can take this. I have some thoughts. Even though I am not on the graduate path yet, I can tell you that I've definitely had to motivate myself in various ways to apply, to get there, because we just lived through a world pandemic, and there were riots, and there's a recession. There were personal stuff too, like heartbreaks and just like several jobs. So I said, I actually had that moment, not when the bad things were happening, because, you know, we all were there, but when good things started coming up, like I started getting job offers with full salaries and benefits, and I had to find myself in the position where I needed to discern and wade through opportunities and say, if I take this full-time salary job, is it going to deter me from my path? Because I'm here for a reason, right? I want a PhD. I decided my freshman year of high school that I wanted to be called Dr. Carmen Solano, right? And that was because I heard a statistic, which was that only 2% of Latina women have PhDs. And I said, well, I'm gonna be one of those 2%. And now, I find that inspiration from other women in my field, especially other Latina women. I have a mentor at Brookings Mountain West, Dr. Magdalena Martinez, who regularly exposes me to people who have passed over the hump, who have faced that existential crisis back when they were my age or whatever age they were. And they tell me it's worth it. It's worth it. But all of that aside, right, because that's all in my exterior, I just remembered that when I worked at law firms, I wasn't happy. I was helping maybe one person at a time, maybe, depending on the case, right? Or I was actually worsening the situation for somebody else, depending on the case type. But with policy, right, this is the difference between law and policy. A lot of people ask me if I'm going to be a lawyer. No. The answer is no. Not after having worked for them. I want to be a doctor of philosophy, and that's because policy is seismic. I can analyze a problem, I can face it out in the real world, I can experience it for myself. For instance, because I'm a college student, Latina, woman of color, and, you know, economic tiers and what have you. But that's what keeps me going, is that even though things don't really change, they change in very small ways, and only because somebody's doing something about it. So once you get to the pivotal point where I'm at, where I'm about to transition between undergraduate and graduate, that is where we realize that we kind of have a responsibility to the community, to society, because we were lucky enough to get education. And that's not to make anybody feel guilty, but it almost happens naturally, because the rage starts to burn within. So if you're raging right now, let me know.
I think one thing is my peers, so kind of seeing like Eduardo and Carmen, they were so welcoming. Like when I entered, even before I entered this program, they were so welcoming, and they really helped me and just to better understand like what graduate school is, also like how this program itself is. So they were really helpful, and I really appreciate both of their helps. And also I would also say that, you know, my parents as well, even though they did not receive an education, But I think they kind of just like remind me like, you know, you're here for a reason. Remember who you were before, who you are now, and who you want to become. And I think I really keep that with me like every single day. I also think, you know, my mentors, my peers, even people who I just like, you know, see within like different departments, like, you know, they all have like separate goals. And I think it's just really nice to see like they all have their different passions. And if I have my own passion, I should go for it as well. And then also really honing in on like, you know, the small things in life that make me happy. So if that's coffee, if that's dancing at a dance, you know, class with different people of different ages, that's always fun for me as well. Just like small things here and there that make my day and that, you know, just continue to fuel, you know, my desire to accomplish my goals.
I am fueled by my desire to help my community. In my undergrad, I did